You take a shower every morning, hot water, shampoo, maybe even a scented candle. Congratulations! You've already done something most medieval people couldn't even imagine, because in the Middle Ages, hygiene wasn't a luxury, it was a mystery. Your teeth rot, your skin itches, your hair is crawling, and when you finally get a chance to wash, the water is brown, the tub is shared, and the local priest tells you bathing too often is basically an invitation to sin. You smell like smoke, sweat, and sheep. Everyone else does too, and here's the kicker. People aren't avoiding baths because they're lazy. They're avoiding them because they genuinely think water can make you sick. And they weren't entirely wrong. So did medieval people really never bathe? Or is that just one of history's nastier myths? Let's wade into the muck. 1. The stench that never left. You step into a medieval street and the first thing that hits you isn't the sights. It's the smell. It doesn't creep up on you. It slams into you like a wall. Smoke from hearth fires chokes the air. Manure piles rot in the gutters, and the scent of unwashed bodies hangs heavy, as if the entire town has been slow-cooked in its own sweat. Forget fresh morning air in this world. The perfume of daily life is a cocktail of wood smoke, spoiled ale, animal dung, and human grease. Imagine a gym locker room where nobody ever leaves. Now add a butcher shop and a horse stable, and a fish market that hasn't been cleaned since last week. Congratulations, you're breathing medieval air. Your clothes don't help. Wool, linen, leather layers of fabric that trap sweat like sponges. Washing them means hauling buckets of cold water, scrubbing with lye soap that burns your hands, and drying everything in damp air that never fully clears the smell. By the time you pull your shirt back on, it's already halfway back to filthy. Bathing yourself, that's a luxury few bother with. Maybe you splash your face with cold water in the morning. Maybe you rinse your hands before a meal. But a full bath, not unless you're sick, rich, or dangerously committed to self-improvement. So people got creative. A sprig of rosemary tucked into your collar, lavender stuffed into your sleeves, sage or mint chewed to mask the taste of rot in your mouth. It didn't stop the stench. It just fought it like perfume fights cigarette smoke. The truth is, nobody expected to smell good. Everyone stank, everyone knew it, and that shared misery became its own kind of normal. Your nostrils adjusted, your brain gave up, and eventually, you stopped noticing until you leave town. Until you breathe mountain air, until you realize that the human race, for centuries, was basically marinating in itself. And just when you think maybe there's hope, maybe a bath could cut through the grime, you find out where bathing actually takes you. 2. Bathhouses, more sin than soap. At first glance, medieval bathhouses sound downright civilized. Picture it, large wooden tubs, hot water poured in by servants, the room hazy with steam, neighbors chatting while soaking side by side, maybe even a splash of rose water or a pinch of herbs. If you had the coin, for a moment, it almost feels modern, but here's the catch. Bathhouses didn't just scrub dirt, they scrubbed reputations. Because alongside the tubs came food, drink, and often companionship. Not the wholesome kind by the 13th century. Many bathhouses doubled as brothels. A quick dip might also mean a quick roll in the sheets. Cleanliness and carnality became impossible to separate, and the church hated it. Priests thundered from pulpits, warning that public baths were dens of lust and disease. Bathhouses were accused of spreading sin faster than they spread soap. Slowly, laws clamped down. Some towns shut them entirely. Others let them rot into ruin. The rare hot soap became more shameful than sacred. The irony. Europeans in the early Middle Ages actually bathed more often than their later descendants. Records show kings hosting grand bathing feasts, nobles relaxing in perfumed tubs. Even peasants could afford the occasional trip to a public bath, but once the brothel connection stuck, the culture collapsed. Now bathing wasn't just rare, it was risky for your soul. Go too often and people started whispering, "Why is it so clean? What are you hiding?" So instead of bathhouses, the medieval world leaned on dry washing. A cloth rub down, a dash of perfume, a dusting of herbs. Your spa day became a quick scrape with a linen rag. By the late Middle Ages, entire generations grew up thinking regular baths were suspicious, sinful, or downright scandalous. Clean skin wasn't a virtue anymore, it was evidence. And if the church's warnings weren't enough to keep you out of the tub, medicine delivered the knockout punch, because according to doctors of the day, water wasn't just sinful, it could actually kill you. 3. Water could kill you. Imagine this. You finally work up the courage to bathe. You fill a wooden tub, heat some water, maybe toss in a sprig of mint if you're fancy. You strip down, ready for that rare moment of relief. And then your neighbor warns you, "Don't do it, that bath could make you sick." It sounds ridiculous now, but in the Middle Ages it made perfect sense. Doctors believed bathing opened the pores wide, turning your skin into an open doorway for disease. Step out of hot water into cold air, and suddenly you weren't clean. You were vulnerable, and to be fair, the water itself didn't help. Streams and rivers were dumping grounds, chamber pots emptied into ditches, butchers rinsed animal guts upstream, tanneries poured in chemicals. So when you sank into your bath, you weren't cleansing. You were steeping yourself in a medieval soup of bacteria to stay safe. People swapped out soap and water for dry cleaning. You rubbed yourself with linen cloths to scrape off dirt. You dusted with powders, like ground herbs or even crushed seashells, to absorb grease. Wealthier households used vinegar or rose water as a rinse. More perfume than purification, doctors encouraged it. They even recommended coating your skin with oil to seal the pores against infection. Dirt wasn't filth, it was armor. A thin layer of grime was considered healthy, protective, even medicinal. So while you were busy avoiding water, you'd grow used to other rituals. Picking lice out of your hair, shaking fleas from your bedding, brushing your teeth with twigs, no toothpaste, just hope. And of course, the smell never went away. Bathing wasn't just rare, it was dangerous, at least that's what everyone believed. Which means when plague or sickness struck, people proudly avoided tubs. Dirt equaled health, cleanliness equaled weakness, and just when you think that belief can't possibly get worse, along comes the Black Death, a world terrified of water. A disease carried by fleas and the human race, too scared of soap to do anything about it. For when washing was a luxury for peasants, bathing was less of an activity and more of an accident. Maybe you fell into a stream while fishing. Maybe you got caught in the rain otherwise. Your wash routine was a wooden bucket, cold water, and whatever courage you had left after a 12-hour day in the fields. And don't think this was weekly. Seasonal was closer to the truth. You scrubbed when dirt built up to the point where even you couldn't stand yourself anymore. But if you were rich, things looked very different. Nobles hauled copper tubs into private chambers. They lined them with linen sheets to keep the metal from burning skin. Servants poured in heated water, then sprinkled herbs, sage, chamomile, rosemary, sometimes even rose petals. The rich didn't just wash, they turned it into a theater. Imagine a medieval spa day. You sink into the water, while musicians play in the corner. Someone pours you wine, a tray of sweetmeats floats past. Maybe a lover slips into the tub beside you. Hygiene becomes less about surviving the smell, more about showing off that you could afford to. Still, don't be fooled, even kings weren't bathing every morning. Records show monarchs like King Louis XIV of France only bathed a few times in their entire lifetime. That's not daily hygiene, that's a special occasion. A monthly soak was generous. Weekly, unthinkable. So yes, people bathed, but it wasn't equal. For peasants, a bucket in a cold hut. For nobles, a candlelit soak perfumed with mint, and everyone in between probably just stayed dirty. The truth is, cleanliness wasn't universal, it was a privilege. And like every privilege in the Middle Ages, the church eventually found a way to make it complicated. 5. The church versus cleanliness. The church versus cleanliness. Here's the part where you'd expect the church to say, be clean, be pure. After all, they loved metaphors about washing away sin, but in practice, the church wasn't handing out soap. Public baths, already sliding into shady reputations, became prime targets for sermons. Priests warned that bathhouses were dens of lust and temptation. Too much nakedness, too much laughter, too much fun in hot water. In short, a slippery slope to eternal damnation. Monks, the supposed holy models of behavior, were instructed to bathe sparingly, sometimes as little as 4 times a year, Easter, Christmas, and maybe to other feast days if they were feeling generous. Too much scrubbing was vanity. Too much concern for the body distracts from care of the soul. And if the holiest men in your community smelled like barns, well, then smelling like barns must be godly. Bathing didn't disappear, it just shifted meanings. For nobles, it was a private indulgence. For peasants, a rare necessity. For the church, it was dangerous. Dirt became piety, soaps became a temptation. A clean body was suspicious, a dirty robe could be holy. So when your priest told you not to worry about the smell, he wasn't wrong. Everyone reeked. And in that world, stink wasn't shameful. It was practically a sacrament. 6. Your doctor prescribes dirt. You go to your medieval doctor with a fever. Today you'd expect Tylenol. Back then, you're getting a lecture about your humor, blood, phlegm, yellow bile, black bile, the four mysterious fluids that supposedly governed every ache, rash or cough, too hot, too cold, too wet, too dry, somewhere. One of those humors is out of whack now. Does your doctor suggest washing up? Absolutely not. Bathing might unbalance your system further. Instead, he prescribes something like, stay dirty, cover yourself in oils to seal the skin, or rub yourself with vinegar, not for cleanliness, but to restore balance. And if you cut yourself, forget antiseptic. Some doctors suggested rubbing the wound with dung. Yes, actual animal dung, because apparently it had healing properties. Spoiler, it did not. The same medical minds who thought leeches could drain away fevers also believed dirt preserved your health. Clean water was risky. A thin layer of grime acted like armor. Washing wasn't medicine, it was sabotage. So, you avoided water, you kept the dirt, you trusted the science. If we're being generous enough to call it that. And this wasn't fringe thinking. University-trained physicians, the best doctors money could buy, advised against frequent bathing. The logic was clear. The more you washed, the weaker you became, the stronger the stink, the stronger the body. Medicine didn't just tolerate filth, it endorsed it. And with the church nodding in agreement, and your doctor prescribing dirt, you learn to embrace the grime. Which might sound ridiculous until you remember what came next. The Black Death, a world terrified of soap, a plague carried by fleas, and you, too busy protecting your pores to notice the real killers crawling in your bed. 7. Plague-proof or pest magnet. The year is 1347. Ships arrive in Europe carrying something more lethal than goods. The Black Death. Within months, entire towns collapse. Hygiene is no longer about comfort. It's survival, and here's the twist. The cleaner you tried to be, the more people thought you were killing yourself. Doctors warned that hot baths opened your pores, leaving you wide open to the invisible plague miasma floating through the air. Clean skin wasn't safe, it was a weakness. So the healthier choice was to stay grimy, layer on more oils, avoid washing at all costs. The problem? The plague wasn't drifting in through pores. It was hitching rides on fleas and lice, and the dirtier you were, the better those pests thrived. You didn't just stink. You became a walking Petri dish. Imagine trying to survive the deadliest epidemic in history while proudly refusing to wash. You scratch, you itch, you cough, and instead of a hot bath, your neighbor suggests prayer and maybe a garlic necklace. Spoiler, it didn't work. Of course, you can't blame them entirely. Modern germ theory wouldn't exist for centuries. To them, plague wasn't caused by bacteria. It was caused by bad air, by God's wrath, by unlucky planets. In that worldview, bathing wasn't hygiene, it was suicide. So during one of humanity's worst health crises, millions doubled down on filth, which meant the fleas, tiny, patient killers, got exactly the breeding ground they needed. And just when you think it couldn't get worse, remember, even if you avoided the plague this time, your body still reeked. So what did people do when water was too dangerous, but the smell was unbearable? 8. Soaps, herbs, and strange substitutes. If you couldn't or wouldn't bathe, you improvised. Enter medieval soap, a mix of animal fat and ash. It was less refreshing lavender bar and more greasy brick that smells faintly of bacon. It cleaned, technically, but left your skin raw. No wonder people reached for alternatives. Rose water was my favorite, not to wash, but to splash. A quick dab behind the ears, a spritz on clothes, vinegar. Too strong enough to cut through grease. Sharp enough to sting, and herbs, rosemary, sage, lavender stuffed into pouches and sewn into clothing. When the body couldn't be clean, at least the air around you could pretend. Clothing itself was fumigated, hung over smoke to chase away fleas. Blasted with incense to mask odors, it didn't kill germs, but it killed time. Wealthy families had perfumed gloves and scented pomanders. The poor had garlic, onion, and prayer. Hygiene became theater. A performance of cleanliness rather than the reality of it. Your skin might be slick with sweat and grime, but if you smelled faintly of rosemary, you could fake decency, at least until the scent wore off. Think of it like medieval deodorant. It didn't erase the smell. It just layered something stronger on top: sweat, rot. Barnyard musk seasoned lightly with mint. And here's the irony. Even the filthiest households cared about odor. They just didn't solve it the way we would. They didn't scrub. They masked, they smoked, they were perfumed. Hygiene wasn't about removing dirt. It was about distracting from it. But once you peel back all those herbs, oils, and perfumes, one question lingers. Did medieval people ever actually smell clean? 9. Did they ever smell clean? So did medieval people really never bathe? Not exactly, they did sometimes. A seasonal dip, a perfumed soak if you were wealthy, a desperate bucket scrub when lice got unbearable. But the myth of the never bathing medieval peasant survives because, compared to us, they may as well have lived in mud. Daily showers impossible, weekly rare, monthly maybe if you were lucky. Hygiene wasn't routine, it was situational. You washed when you could, when you had to, or when someone forced you. But here's the twist. They didn't see themselves as dirty. They saw you, modern you, as absurd. Who needs to waste water every morning? Who risks their health by soaking in dangerous tubs? Dirt wasn't shameful. Dirt was natural. Dirt was holy. Even if priests and kings reeked, why wouldn't you? And yet, in their own way, they did try. Herbs, perfumes, scented oils, the little tricks of masking and fumigating. They weren't ignoring hygiene, they were redefining it for a world where water could kill. So no, they never bathed, but by the standards of your scented candles, eucalyptus steamers, and triple action shower gels. They may as well have. Next time you step into a hot shower, pause for a second, feel the water, the warmth, the luxury of being truly clean, then thank history for progress. Because if you'd been born 600 years earlier, you wouldn't be soaking, you'd be scratching. And you wouldn't smell like rosemary, you'd smell like everyone else. A human stew of sweat, smoke, and livestock. If this dive into medieval grime made you grateful for hot showers, hit like and subscribe.